beverage of choice. As you can see, you probably just got a little notification that our convening this morning is going to be recorded. So if you can just click and give your consent for that, that would be wonderful. I am Dr. Christine Norton, and I am the president of the board of directors of Education Reach for Texans. As you can hear, we have some people still joining the meeting. It's like a little doorbell every time someone enters. So we'll just consider that like the welcoming noise, right? I am a professor of social work at Texas State University, and I am also the foster care liaison at Texas State University. So like many of you, I have the privilege and the honor of doing this good work. I wanted to start off, first of all, I want to let you know that my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I also wanted to let you know I am calling in from Region 7, which is now San Marcos, Texas. And I want to just start by acknowledging the land I'm calling in from has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among Indigenous people. And I think it's really important to honor and respect the diverse Indigenous people and communities that are connected to this territory on which I live and work. So this is our 11th convening for Education Reach. We missed last year because of COVID. We decided to cancel, and it was really heartbreaking not to get together. And I just want to acknowledge, we could just take a big village breath. Whew, let it out, right? This has been a hard year. And we know that the issues that arose this year due to the pandemic and the racial injustice and social unrest have disproportionately affected the youth and young adults from the communities that we serve, those young adults with lived experience in foster care. From housing instability to food insecurity to social isolation and mental health, we've even seen past traumas be triggered by students having to be in survival mode again. Our young adults, the students that you all serve, have needed your support even more during this difficult year. But no doubt, so have you. I know that many of you that work on the front lines of serving young people and families in crisis have been carrying an extra heavy burden. And so we just really want to honor and appreciate you. And we hope that you are taking care of yourselves, nurturing those that you love, your world outside of work. All of that is so critical to sustaining yourself to do this really good work. And that is why Education Reach exists. This is meant to be a community of support. Education Reach was established in 2009 by a group of key stakeholders who wanted to make the invisible visible. There was a group of students in higher education that no one was tracking, no one was aware of, no one realized the extent of the intersectionality of their identities, along with the history of complex trauma that they brought to a very high pressure situation, which is post-secondary education. And so this group of people came together to honor those students, to really explore the unique needs of those students, to highlight the strengths and resilience of those students. And so bringing together professionals from K through 12, post-secondary education, along with other key stakeholders in child welfare, workforce development, and all around the community, coming together to change the educational trajectory for people with lived experience in foster care, to create equity, access, inclusion, support, best practices, legislative advocacy. That is what Education Reach does. And primarily, we are a group of people that believe in coming together, and that it really does take a village to do this work. And so we're thankful not only to have key stakeholders, but also to have youth and students and young adults represented here with lived experience in foster care, because much like the child welfare system, you know, we hear those voices of saying nothing about us without us. We don't want anything we do at Education Reach to be a top-down approach. We want it to be a grassroots approach that involves and highlights the voices of those young adults with lived experience in foster care. So thanks to y'all for being a part of this movement as well. I want to start by just honoring, Sheila, if you would forward to the slide of our board of directors, if you have not already. Great. So first we have our executive officers, and everyone can just wave. Those of you that are on our executive board, thank you for all of your good service to this organization. And then we also have our REACH board members, and these folks do this work obviously as volunteers, and because they believe in this work. They believe that students with lived experience in foster care deserve and need that extra support to be successful in higher education. And in fact, the outcomes related to the hard work of this board show that youth and young adults with lived experience in foster care, they achieve at exactly the same rate. They're on par with the traditional university student population when provided that tuition and fee waiver support and the campus support of a foster care liaison and a holistic program. That's what we're seeing, and we're continuing to do research in that area. There's one person in particular that I want to honor on our board, Deb Emerson, and we've got so many people in the little Brady Bunch boxes. I don't know if there's any way to really embarrass Deb and pin her up there for everyone to see, but Deb Emerson has been with the Department of Family and Protective Services for 38 years, serving most currently as the CPS State Director of Permanency. She is a tireless advocate and champion for transitional living services and really paying close attention to what happens to youth in foster care when they begin that aging out process. What services do they need to transition out and lead healthy adult lives? And in particular with REACH, Deb has been a huge champion for bringing supervised independent living to college campuses throughout the state of Texas. Deb is retiring from the department and is retiring from our board of directors. She is reporting for grandma duty, and she has this beautiful life ahead of her. And so, Deb, we wish you the best, and we just thank you so much for your service to Education Reach, to the Department of Family and Protective Services, and to children and families across the state of Texas for your beautiful career. Thank you so much. Let's give Deborah, you can unmute and cheer. Woo woo! I love that. All right, thank you. Wonderful. So we, again, in the spirit of recognizing people, would like to recognize a few really important members of this community. Every year, we are looking to highlight the work that you all do in the community as a way of really, again, honoring how hard this work is at times, right? To really step in times of crisis and support. So the first award that we have is for the John Emerson Award. And I want to give you a little bit of background about these awards as I present them, because I like to honor the people that the award is named after as well, because they're such amazing public servants as well. So the first award, the John Emerson Award, named in honor of John Emerson, who was the post-secondary education advisor for Casey Family Programs for 18 years. He oversaw post-secondary education training, practice, and policy advocacy for young adults from foster care. And he continues to provide consultation, technical assistance, consulting to help states all around the US develop similar programs, campus support programs, foster care support programs. He's an author of the Casey Family Programs Supporting Success document, which many of you have probably used in your work, as well as numerous other articles and books. And he has particularly provided valuable leadership initiatives and support for the Texas higher education program. So we just want to thank John. And when we created this award in honor of John, we were looking for people who have experience working with students currently in and who are alumni from the foster care system, who provide a high quality of leadership advocacy skills that are recognized by their peers, who go above and beyond the required service level of responsibility, who demonstrate commitment to improving circumstances and educational outcomes for students, who have active involvement in Education Reach for Texans, and have been, again, nominated and supported by their peers. So I am so honored to present this year's John Emerson Award to Norma Davila. Norma is the foster care coordinator at the Foster Care Support Center at Texas A&M San Antonio. And so I just want to read you a little bit about Norma's bio and some of what her peers have said about her. And then we will once again unmute and give Norma a giant Zoom round of applause. Norma has worked for over 20 years supporting foster youth in the city of San Antonio. She worked as an education specialist in the Transition Center for most of those 20 years, helping foster youth aging out of the system to gain access to college. Norma has worked diligently in San Antonio to educate higher education professionals on the tuition and fee waiver, financial aid for foster youth, and ETV. Her nominator says, I met her in 2016 and immediately realized that I was meeting someone who is passionate about foster youth. In November 2019, I was able to hire Norma as our coordinator for foster support services at Texas A&M University San Antonio. She supports all foster and adopted youth at A&M San Antonio from the college application process all the way through to graduation. That's the goal, right? Good job, Norma. With the addition of Norma, we have been able to create a center for our foster youth, a supply closet and food pantry for our foster youth, and so much more. Norma is extremely knowledgeable, and we are so lucky to have her on our team. She was recently nominated for a university award geared towards women who achieve on campus. She was also, her presence has also helped our year-to-year retention rates of foster youth on our campus. Norma has worked for us for a full year, and in her first year, all right, listen to this, everybody, they had an 80% retention rate of students in foster care. I can tell you all that I know that without Norma, our organizing efforts, making connections, and using her knowledge to support and advocate, we would not be where we are today. And then some of her students that she has served have said, before we even stepped on campus, Norma was so kind to us. She provided gifts, bedding items to make the residence hall comfortable, and snacks. Even as a college educator for more than 25 years, it has been a refreshing experience. She worked so hard to let my daughter and other students know they were an important part of this community, and she wanted them to be successful. There have been tremendous struggles with learning in the COVID environment and not having the senior year in high school or freshman year in college that so many students hope for. Many students learn best in a face-to-face environment and miss the socialization of meeting new people. The transition has not always been easy, but Norma has shared information about activities and ways to get involved. She has offered the laptop loan program to resolve connection issues, shared information on tutoring and all of the resources that the school has to offer. She has contacted advisors. She embodies the mission of this university, and we are so proud of the work she has done. Please join me in honoring Norma Davila for the 2021 John Emerson Award. Her passion in this role has no limits. Access, a sense of belonging and support, and positive messages are a large part of the success of all students, but foster care students in particular. Congratulations, Norma.
Woo! Woo! Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Norma, are you here with us? Is there
I
anything
am.
you'd like to say?
Can you all see me?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Dr. Norton. As you're reading that, oh my God, my heart is pounding and I'm near tears because I've known you for many, many years, the whole time since Education Reach started. And John Emerson is near and dear to my heart. As some of you may not know, but he's my mentor. He trained me. I worked for Casey Family Programs for many years. And so just to receive this award with his name on it is just, it's a tearjerker. And thank you very much. And I see a lot of familiar faces on here today. And I really would not be here without all my, as you said, it's a team effort. This is, it takes a village. Everyone on this call today is my village. And thank you, thank you, thank you. You don't know how emotional this makes me, because this is, I have come full circle. My first foster youth I ever worked with was with Casey Family Programs. And she is now 40 years old, and we are now really, really good friends. So very near and dear to my heart. So thank you all very much.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Norma, you made me cry, which is not hard to do, but thank you so much. Oh my goodness. That's
And
such
I
a
wish,
cool
I wish
story.
John was here so I could give him a big hug.
I know. Well, we'll have to, well,
No.
yeah, you'll have to definitely connect
thank
with him.
you.
That's such a beautiful full circle. Thank you so much. Take a deep breath. We really appreciate all of your hard work. So our next award is the Kathleen Christensen Award. And the Kathleen Christensen Award is given each year to a dedicated Education Reach for Texans board member, named in honor of Dr. Kathleen Christensen, who is Vice President of Student Services at Austin Community College and founder and former board member of Education Reach for Texans. When Kathleen retired from our board, we knew we needed a way to keep her spirit with us as a reminder to go above and beyond, and to always, oh, I'm gonna get choked up, to always keep the young adults that we serve at the forefront of our motivation, the forefront of our why. I can say, looking around at my board, that there are so many people that fit this description, but this year, voted by his peers to receive this award, the Kathleen Christensen Award is being given to Andy Homer. Andy has worked tirelessly in his role on the board to help Education Reach advocate for policy change at the state legislature. As the Director of Public Affairs for Texas CASA, he leads Texas CASA's legislative advocacy efforts and works on a variety of public policy issues affecting the child welfare system, particularly focused on creating educational pathways of success for former foster youth. Andy's prior experience includes nearly 10 years of service as a staff member in the Texas Senate, including Chief of Staff. He also directed a special Senate interim committee on welfare reform and drafted its report to the legislature. Andy served as Director of Government Relations for over a dozen years for the Texas Public Employees Association, a professional association for active and retired state employees. He has worked extensively on state budget issues, health and human services policy issues, and has been deeply involved in a number of child welfare policy issues as well. Andy has worked with DFPS on foster care redesign and is also a volunteer advocate with CASA of Travis County. If you have ever met Andy, you know he has a heart the size of the state of Texas. And that big heart cares for all children and youth in this state as if they were his own. Andy helps all of us understand the big, crazy world of state politics so we can build the relationships necessary to create change. Andy, thank you so much for all of your positive energy, kindness, and dedication you bring to the board of directors. We cannot thank you enough for your service and for surviving this very stressful legislative session. Thank you so much. Let's give Andy a round of applause.
Thanks, everybody. The whole board deserves this award. It really is a team effort. And I just want to, I think one of the first things that I worked on this issue was back in 2015 when we passed the legislation that created the foster care liaison position at higher ed institutions. And that actually was, an idea that came from the Children's Commission, from Tiffany Roper and Jamie Bernstein. So it's just really been great to get to know everybody, to work on these issues. And I'm thankful to Texas CASA. And, I've learned so much from being a CASA volunteer. So thank you, Christine, and to all the board members. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. Well, with that, I think I will turn it over to Sheila. I did want to just say really quickly, I would be remiss next year, just planting the seed. We're gathering virtually this year, but we are excited to announce that next year we will be back in person at Angelo State. Dr. Flores, you can wave hello, and Angelo State will be hosting us with our Education Reach convening, and we will be getting out, obviously, save the date information to come. But we did just want to plant the seed that we are excited that we will be able to gather in person. But again, just thank you to all of you. And I will turn it over to another one of our star public servants on our board of directors, founder of Education Reach as well, Sheila Bustillos.
Thanks, Christine. I will say that Dr. Flores has done a great job, and we've always tried to keep this conference affordable for people to attend. But next year, he's really kind of gone above and beyond, making sure that it's not going to break the bank to get you there. So we really hope to see you all there in San Angelo next year. So like Christine said, my name is Sheila Bustillos. I'm one of the co-founders of Reach, and I'm currently a board member. So, I really want to echo what Christine and her sentiments and she was talking about earlier. The U.S. is really reawakened, I'll say, civil discomfort while we reconcile the traumas of our past. When specifically calling attention to racial unrest, it's impossible to understand the atrocities projected and inflicted on people of color in our nation without reconciling and facing racialized trauma. Cultural trauma, although different from racialized trauma, acts similarly in our bodies as it resists systems of power and privilege brought on by white supremacy, or how Resmaa Menakem coins it, white body supremacy, that not only calls attention to both the traumas of people who are the oppressed, but also the oppressors. So we all face this racialized trauma, and it's all in our students. A culture like no other is the culture of foster care, where so many of our young adults we serve not only embody the traumas of their family systems, but also of state systems. So full in racialized trauma, homophobic, transphobic traumas, along with many others, you have a recipe for a body in need of support, love, and healing. So at Education Reach for Texans, that's our goal. We know the traumas of our people that we serve very intimately, and we hope that everybody on the call today comes to know their students as well. We have to heal. And it's a trial and error process, and we have to have many systems of support. So we're here to support one another on a journey towards healing, that we might first heal ourselves and our own childhood traumas so that we are our best selves to serve the young adults we experience in foster care who coexist as a body both broken by trauma and as a body capable of powerful growth from trauma. So thank you for taking the first steps towards this healing journey with us. We'll also say that, based on recent research, our young adults have a 1.7% graduation rate from all 2-year, 4-year, and technical schools certificate programs. And we need to raise that number. When Norma's talking about an 80% retention rate, when Christine and you look at data from FACES and how well their students are doing with support on campuses, we also know that students are 3.5 times more likely to graduate with a post-secondary education credential if they use their tuition waiver. So there's so much work we have to do. We have to help students know if they are eligible for the tuition waiver, and we have to help them move and navigate through these benefits and these processes. So thank you all again for being with us today. Just a few logistics. So we are recording, like we had mentioned before, and this recorded session will be available for 30 days on our website, our conference page on our website. So there we have the chat feature, so it's available for questions as we move through our panels and our keynotes. And then we also, let's see. And then make sure you stay muted. And if you don't, then we will ask you very politely to mute yourselves. And then if you want in the chat, just to let us know where you're from and which institution you're at. We'd love to just celebrate you and understand where you're coming from today. And we, Education Reach has always been a family, and we love that if it's your first time that you're joining this family. We have our regional breakouts this afternoon, and our goal is that those regional breakouts become a consistent and sustainable meeting throughout every region of the state of Texas indefinitely moving forward. And we'll talk more about our goals for those regional breakouts later, but don't leave us today after the keynotes and the panels. Please join us for those regional breakouts. And with all of that said, I want to hand it off to the lovely and fabulous Jamie Bernstein. She's the executive director for the Supreme Court of Texas Children's Commission. She's the Education Reach for Texans vice president, and she's also a board member and very talented and wonderful and fabulous. So Jamie, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Sheila. Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's so great to see everybody on screen and to see your names coming through and just to get some context about who's in our virtual room today. I really look forward to seeing everybody together in person, but I have that feeling that I have every year. That's that re-energizing feeling of being around other people who are extremely motivated to find a better tomorrow for students who've experienced foster care. I'll keep my comments brief and introduce our illustrious panel. I'm very excited for the lineup today. I just want to do a brief thank you to Amy O'Keefe and Brenda Sweeten, who were faculty for the Foster Care 101 liaison training yesterday. And we envision this next session as you all are educators and in the education community, this is more of a 201. And we hope to provide you with some insights into the impact of COVID-19 and some legislative and policy updates that we've seen. So the overview of what's going to happen for the next hour and change is we're going to hear some updates on federal law and policy. Then we'll hear what happened at the state legislature this session that just finished a couple days ago. And then we'll round it out with a DFPS agency update. That will all take an hour, and then we'll leave about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. I highly encourage you all to take advantage of this faculty. They're extremely knowledgeable. So please ask the questions that you have, put them in the chat, and I will ask the panelists those questions. So I'll be watching the chat feature. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. We have Dr. Angelique Day, Andy Homer, and Deborah Emerson, and I will turn it over to Angelique.
Sorry, struggling with my mute button. Good morning, everyone. My name is Angelique Day. I'm an associate professor at the University of Washington School of Social Work, and I'm super excited to be back at the Texas Reach Conference. I was there a few years back when I was newly transitioning out of the U.S. Congress to the University of Washington. So super excited to be back with you and to talk about the federal legislative updates today. I'm going to spend the bulk of my time talking about the new opportunities we have under the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, which was signed in December of 2020 to better support our older youth who are in care. And I should probably apologize, Jamie, and ask, did you want all the panelists to be introduced all at once and then me jump in, or do you want me to jump in and then have panelists introduce themselves when they begin their portion?
Sure, let's do introductions real quick. Andy, can you give an introduction, please?
Hi, everybody. This is Andy Homer. I'm the Chief Public Policy Officer at Texas CASA and a board member for Education Reach and also a CASA volunteer. And I'll be back after Angelique. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah?
Hi, and I'm Deborah Emerson. I'm the CPS Director for Transitional Living Services. And as many of you know that I am retiring this Friday. So this will be my last Education Reach for Texans conference, but I had the pleasure of being at the first one. And so I have just seen the tremendous growth that has occurred with this conference. And I look forward to sharing information with you a little bit later about all of the exciting things going on with our Transitional Living Services program to support youth and young adults who are currently or formerly in foster care and how we go about supporting their needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Angelique, back to you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. And I do have slides, so hold on one second and I will put those up on the screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see those. Can I get a thumbs up? All right, awesome, thank you. All right. So the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 incorporates much of the bill language offered by HR 7947, which was a bill introduced by Danny Davis, my former boss, entitled Supporting Foster Youth and Families Through the Pandemic Act. So this bill incorporates so much opportunity for our young people who are college enrolled, and hopefully all of you are super busy implementing this, and hopefully through this presentation today, I can help you understand the nuances of the bill to ensure that you're familiar with it and that you can maximize its implementation in the state of Texas. So some very exciting features, specifically in addition to the regular appropriations that occurred in fiscal year 2021, this particular piece of legislation appropriates an additional $400 million in supplemental funding for the Chafee program, of which $50 million was set aside to be used for the education training voucher program in particular. Another exciting feature about this particular portion of the policy is that the supplemental appropriation has 0 state match requirements. So you can draw this down without the need to raise money at the state level to maximize your federal allocation, which is just an amazing opportunity every time you have it. Additionally, in regards to the ETV and how it can be awarded, the amount for each young person is increased from $5,000 to $12,000 per student, and that can be drawn down through September 2022. It also provides new flexibilities and new assistance in response to the COVID-19 pandemic public health emergency, and we're going to see some additional things as I continue through this presentation. The law allows ETV eligibility to be extended from age 26 to age 27, and I think that's important to make sure that we are reaching out to older youth that we typically have not reached out to in implementing these programs before. And that, again, this provision on age is also extended through September 2022. The bill language also provides for flexibility in what ETV funds can be used for, and youth no longer have to maintain satisfactory academic progress to continue receiving the award. So that's an important change. Additionally, if youth have been unable to enroll in higher education due to COVID-19, they can still be eligible for ETV funding. So that is, again, an important difference from the previous enacted law. Okay, in addition, 6 million of that 400 million set aside for Chafee has been set aside specifically to conduct evaluations related to how this money was used in states to help both the Children's Bureau and Congress understand how this resource was used. So that's specifically for data collection around Chafee programming. So for all my savvy evaluators in the room, this is a conversation you can be having about how you can best understand how the Texas portion of that appropriation was spent in your state. These resources also waive the 30% limitations that states can draw down to support older youth with housing. And that is super exciting because we know that housing and the discussion on housing has been at the forefront of the COVID-19 discussions from the beginning. This law also expands housing dollars to be spent on all youth who've experienced foster care on or after their 14th birthdays, even if they experienced permanency before turning 18 years of age. So again, this is a change in eligibility criteria compared to how housing has been allocated previously. These new housing eligibility requirements apply until September 30th of 2021. The Fostering Stable Housing Opportunities section of the bill extends housing for youth being served by public housing agencies in particular. So any of your HUD supported housing that you have in your state. So specifically, if you have youth in HUD supported housing or subsidized housing, they're eligible to have their stays in these HUD housing programs extended for up to 24 months. So again, that's an important piece of information and advocacy tool for you to have in your pocket. Okay. States are also eligible for up to $500,000 to implement driving and transportation programs for foster youth. Specifically, up to $4,000 per year for youth between the ages of 15 and 26 can be spent on housing provisions. These costs include, but are not limited to, driver's license, insurance costs, and vehicle purchases. And this provides a new opportunity for foster youth to pay for transportation-related costs without expending their ETVs or other financial aid resources to do so. So again, a super exciting new provision. All right, and then a final piece of this legislation is that all foster youth who have exited foster care due to age during the time of the public health emergency, which is defined in this particular bill as being on or after January 27 of 2020, can voluntarily re-enter foster care, even if you're not in a state that has foster care extension. So that's really important and exciting provision. And I know many folks, including folks in this room, have been advocating at the federal level for a foster care extension. So super exciting that it's here. So all states, regardless of status as a foster care extension state, must provide foster youth who have exited care during the pandemic of the option to reenter care via the use of a public awareness campaign. So all states should be working on that, or maybe in your state, you've already seen some of that come out. And those who re-enter care must be allowed to continue transition planning and have access to the full array of services to ensure their safety, permanence, and well-being. I want to emphasize these points in particular, as we've seen some specific patterns that have emerged during COVID with foster care youth enrolled in traditional four-year college settings, doing much better than students in two-year and vocational education settings. So we need to make sure that we have some wraparound supports, including campus-based support programs that have been built for youth in four-year schools in these other types of college settings. And these public awareness campaigns really do need to reach these important subgroups of students equitably. So I'm going to veer off talking about policy to really help you understand this pretty groundbreaking study that was done during COVID with a very large population of young people, to help you understand the education, enrollment, and retention behavior we saw during this time. So in March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic caused higher education to enter this emergency distance learning. Many governments responded by ordering institutions of higher education to cease face-to-face instruction for most of their students, requiring them to switch almost overnight to online teaching and virtual education. Although the pandemic has disrupted educational pathways for all students, youth from foster care have experienced the biggest setbacks. Unlike their peers, youth from foster care often have fewer support networks or safety nets to turn to in times of crisis. You all know this very well. The sudden closing of college campuses created a lot of uncertainty and emotional stress for foster youth. So to understand this phenomenon better, there was a national study that commenced that was coordinated by Think of Us Global, which is a national foster youth advocacy organization that's actually run exclusively by foster care alumni. This cross-sectional data was collected over a 3-week period starting in November 2020. There were about 27,000 applicants who participated with Think of Us Global. This data was collected as part of their micro grant program to support youth who were facing economic challenges during the pandemic. All young people who were between the ages of 18 and 28 with foster care backgrounds were invited to apply, and they received responses from young people in all 50 states across the US. Now, of the 27,000 young people that applied for this award, 26% of those applicants, or about 7,700, were enrolled in post-secondary education programs as of March 2020, right before the US announced that we were in this COVID-19 pandemic. What we did find from looking at enrollments right before pandemic and then up into this point in time in November 2020, what was happening with these young people's college going behaviors, we saw that foster youth who were enrolled in certificate or vocational programs were significantly more likely to drop out during the pandemic than those in more traditional college settings, and that was almost 3 times that rate. We also saw that students who lived off campus during the pandemic were more than 2 times likely to drop out than students who were living on campus. So those programs that have that on-campus housing really served as a protective factor during the time of COVID crisis. And I just want to say how valuable that was when the universities made the decision to keep those dorms open, even when those classrooms closed in terms of moving to virtual spaces. We also saw that our African-American students were struggling more to stay in college than students of other races. And our students who were parenting at the time of COVID also were much more likely to leave campus during the COVID, or much more likely to leave college during the COVID experience than those who were not parenting in addition to attending classes. For our LGBTQ students, we did not see them necessarily drop out at a significant rate compared to other students, but we saw those LGBTQ students more likely to go from full-time to part-time status during the pandemic. And we saw that happening at 1.5 times the rate of other populations of students. Interesting in this data, we found some protective factors, including that our young women were more likely to hang in there and stay enrolled in college during the pandemic. We saw higher rates of retention among our students who identified as having a Hispanic ethnicity versus those that didn't. Our full-time enrolled students were more protected, and again, those who lived on campus. So the ability to maintain engagement in campus community life, including living on campus during the pandemic, appears to have been a large protective factor for foster youth in promoting their education and well-being during the pandemic crisis. We know that campus support programs that you all offer and operate have played a large part in supporting these youth since their sense of belonging on campus and promoting their engagement in campus life. We know from this pandemic study that infrastructure needs to be built first for vocational education settings so that they can provide the same level of wraparound supports that we see in more traditional college settings. So as you all are thinking about your future advocacy agenda in Texas, since Texas is a national leader in terms of the supports in post-secondary ed that you provide your young people, that I challenge you to be, the national leaders in making the same connections for our kids in the vocational education certificate spaces that you have for kids in more traditional college spaces. So now I'm going to go back to explaining some of the nuances of this bill. So thank you for listening to my COVID rant. Some additional provisions in the Appropriations Act, which specifically are targeting institutions of higher education that I wanted to point out because I think they're lesser known in terms of the child welfare community. That there are 2 specific provisions in the Consolidated Act related to higher education institutions and how you can make decisions differently to support college-going behaviors for our foster care youth. Specifically, Section 479A of the law gives financial aid administrators discretion to adjust costs of attendance and values used to calculate student financial aid need, and with values used to calculate Pell Grant award amounts. Specifically, the formula for cost of attendance has been changed. The expected family contribution language has been eliminated and replaced with the language student aid index. The student aid index calculation has three primary categories: one for dependent students, one for independent students who do not have dependents, and one for independent students who do have dependents. Any student who requests a review through their student financial aid office cannot be charged a student fee for this review. So this is an opportunity for students to advocate for themselves without having to worry about increased resources for this to happen. To make this request is important because this provision in the law increases the maximum Pell Grant award from $6,490 to $6,495. That's a $150 increase from what the students were awarded in their fall 2020 award packages. For crossover youth and youth who were previously incarcerated, so if you have any of those young people on your institutions, they are now eligible for Pell Grants, which they were not prior to the passage of this legislation. The law also greatly simplifies the FAFSA form from being 108 questions down to 36 questions. So for those of you who are gearing up to support young people and filling out their FAFSA for next fall, it is going to look quite different. Okay. So Congress, the Children's Bureau, and states are really struggling with how to spend down these large dollars that I've talked about today, especially how to prioritize, reach out and find young people that are age 23 and older, because they no longer have those active cases. So they're not as easy to find to be able to ensure they're getting their benefits. This is where our institutions of higher education can step up. You know who your foster care alumni are. So it's really critical that you are in contact with your state child welfare authority to make sure that these young people that you're serving can take full advantage of the benefits offered under the Consolidated Appropriation Act that they are eligible to receive. I now want to just briefly talk about a couple other pieces of legislation that have specific provisions in there that can also be used to support foster youth on your college campuses. For example, the American Rescue Plan of 2021, which was signed in March of 2021, provides students up to $1,700 in additional financial assistances from their colleges. So again, these are opportunities for you to patchwork all of these different resources together to make sure that your students are able to take advantage of all these opportunities. In addition, your students should be eligible for the $1,400 stimulus checks. So it's great to connect with your students to find out if they've received that or to support them in advocating to make sure they receive that. Those $1,400 payments for stimulus checks should be on top of the $1,200 stimulus that was distributed in April 2019 and the $600 stimulus that was distributed in January of 2020. Additionally, in the American Rescue Plan Act, there was $27 billion allocated for rental housing assistance, specifically including emergency rental assistance, and that of that $27 billion, $5 billion was set aside specifically for homeless youth and youth who have been victims of human trafficking. You know who those students are on your college campus. So again, these are new opportunities to advocate to ensure that they have stable housing and can draw down these resources that they are eligible for. This last slide I have for you today provides you information on legislation that has been introduced, but it has not been passed yet, but if passed, would also bolster the ability for us to support college-going foster youth. Specifically, the Propel Act, or HR 177, expands the use of Pell Grants by allowing them to be used for technical and vocational training, apprenticeship programs, and other on-the-job training programs. And again, we've had some discussion about vocational training today and how to expand equity in that particular education platform. This particular bill would help us reach that goal. Secondly, the Youth Core Act of 2021, HR 854, would amend the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or what we know as the WIA, to re-engage disconnected youth in education and workforce, and provides eligible youth stipends or paid work experience. So my college administrators and college people on the phone, why is this important? Because if this bill were to pass, this bill could be used to support or pay your young people who are in majors, who are in required unpaid internships, to get paid to be participating in those classes, which is really important because so many of our young people have to make very hard decisions on, you know, this internship is taking 2 or 3 days a week of my life. I cannot keep my job and successfully pass my internship. This eliminates that worry. So to pass this bill would be an amazing step forward in solidifying and stabilizing young people in majors who are required to participate in internship programs. And then finally, the National Apprenticeship Act of 2021, specifically HR 447, promotes the integration of apprenticeship programs in post-secondary settings. You all saw from the COVID data that when we can offer opportunities to support young people in places that provide wraparound supports for them, they are more likely to stay in college, more likely to stay focused when they feel that sense of belonging in that community. And if we can expand the opportunities that we provide in collegiate settings, you know, through providing apprenticeship opportunities, that can strengthen and support the success of young people who are interested in that particular education pathway. All right, I am done now.
Thank you so much, Angelique. That was an excellent presentation. So much robust information. Appreciate that. We're going to move on now to Andy and Angelique. There are quite a few questions that have come in through the chat. I'll send them to you if you have time to respond in writing. I think that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, Andy, we'd love to hear the state updates from you at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. This is Andy Homer. I'm the Chief Public Policy Officer at Texas CASA, and I'm going to try and give us a pretty quick update on what happened. As you know, the legislature actually just ended its regular session on Monday. So it was 20 weeks of all kinds of stuff happening over at the Texas Capitol. And there was a significant amount of legislation that was passed and some funding things that affect the foster care system in broad sorts of ways, as well as some things specifically regarding the intersection of foster care and, you know, post-secondary education. I think the most direct bill that affects those issues is House Bill 700, which was passed by Representative Jarvis Johnson out of Houston. And it basically requires the Department of Family and Protective Services to set up a work group in collaboration with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to figure out how you can get college credits awarded for completion of our preparation for adult learning curriculum, our PAL curriculum. And so that would be a great benefit for our older youth who do go through PAL, because it would automatically lock in our tuition and fee waiver here in Texas. As you know, if you don't take advantage of that by enrolling or getting a college credit, you lose that benefit at age 26 under Texas law. And so this is a way to really help ensure that more kids lock that in. And, you know, sometimes they do want to access this later on. And so this would be a really good thing. In addition to that, there are a number of provisions added to House Bill 700 that were actually the provisions in Senate Bill 1084. And those do have to do with PAL. It makes it sure that it's easier for any youth or young adults with disabilities to access it. It adds some transition planning around housing, and it creates some other requirements in there. That was a standalone bill that they added on the floor in the Senate to House Bill 700, and the combination of those two is really a good thing for our older and transitioning youth in state care here in Texas. Let me preface all this by saying that, the session ended on May 31st. Most of this legislation takes effect on September 1 of this year. That's the normal effective date for legislation. We are still, however, in the veto period. So in Texas, laws go into effect when they're passed unless the governor vetoes them. And he has a time limit. I believe it's June 20th. He has to make a decision on whether to veto anything. So there is some chance of that. I don't expect any of the bills that I'm going to talk about to be vetoed, however. In addition to House Bill 7, one bill that I think is really important for kids in care and in extended care is House Bill 80, also by Representative Jarvis Johnson. And it would prevent judges from fining kids for misdemeanor offenses that are fine only. We've been working on this issue for a long time over the legislature. Kids in care don't really have the means to pay these legal fees, the fines that may result from Class C misdemeanors or something like that. And it shouldn't be the foster parents' responsibility, and it's not the department's responsibility. So really what House Bill 80 has done is it has prevented, it basically says that the judges cannot fine kids who are in foster care or extended foster care for any fine-only offense that may occur. So this would apply to all the children in supervised independent living who are in extended foster care as well. So I think that's a big thing. And sometimes if you don't pay these things, you end up with a warrant for failure to pay or failure to appear. And it's a problem that hasn't really, isn't widely known, but we see it in the CASA network. And occasionally kids go to try and get their driver's license and they're arrested because there's a outstanding warrant for failure to appear, failure to pay. So that's a really good thing. In addition to that, we had another bill that Senator Menendez and Representative James White passed that expanded the ability to use state funds to pay for costs associated with getting your driver's license. I know Angelique said that there's federal money to help with that as well. But we set up a fund last time that people contribute to when they're registering their vehicle. It's an option, and it's actually generated a lot of funds. And so we were able to expand that. We have waived the driver's licenses, state issued IDs, birth certificates, all of that in state law for kids who are in foster care and who are homeless. And so this legislation essentially expands the ability to use these state funds that are in this special fund to pay for driver's education, for other costs associated with that. It doesn't include insurance, but it would include a lot of other things associated with that. And most notably, I think what's important about this is that the Texas Workforce Commission agreed to essentially be the fiscal agent so that when someone has costs like this, they would send that request for reimbursement to the Texas Workforce Commission. And I just think that's a great way to get kids connected. The Workforce Commission has become a really great partner to the foster care system to try and increase opportunities and training for kids who need it, foster youth or former youth who were formerly in care. And so this is a great way to make that connection. I think one of the other bills that's significant for the population that we work with is was Senate Bill 1059, and this basically would streamline the process to do Medicaid eligibility determination for former foster youth. And as you know, under federal law, kids who are eligible to age 26 to maintain their Medicaid coverage. But oftentimes, the state process required you to recertify every year. And a lot of kids are moving around or, otherwise just, aren't doing that. So this would really make it more of an automatic enrollment process for young adults who have left foster care but are still eligible for Medicaid. There's a little wrinkle on this. There was not a provision in the budget to take care of this. And so we'll have to figure out how to make sure that it gets implemented by the Health and Human Services Commission. But the legislation did pass. I think one of the other significant laws or issues that happened this time was the continued funding for the foster care pilot program down at the University of Texas in San Antonio. They administer that along with their partners in San Antonio, with the courts, with Alamo colleges, and with Texas A&M down in San Antonio. And I think the Education Reach Board members are very familiar with this effort down there. And it really is the first really highly focused state money that's just designed specifically to figure out how to support kids to get into post-secondary education, and then to help support them to, to graduate and to achieve success. So they maintain that $1.75 million annual funding that flows through the University of Texas at San Antonio. We're really excited about that. I know Megan and some other folks from San Antonio are with us today. And so that's exciting. And hopefully, it will provide good data that we can use as the basis to see about getting additional funding to support programs in other colleges and universities and community colleges around the state. I know that's a long-term goal for Education Reach. I just want to talk about a few bills that didn't pass, but Angelique mentioned, what will things look like in the future? We've now had 3 sessions where they tried to get legislation enacted that would create homeless liaisons at higher ed institutions. It's very similar to the foster care liaisons. It hasn't passed. This session, House Bill 214 made it out of committee, didn't make it to the floor for debate. Last session, this bill made it out of the House and over to the Senate. I believe it got a hearing, but never made it out of committee. So there is an ongoing effort to do this. I believe there's also some federal legislation that would require higher ed institutions to have this. We have a pretty good system for homeless youth at the, in our public education system because of McKinney-Vento, but we don't have the same level of support at the higher ed level. So I think that's something they'll continue to look at. There also was a bill by Representative Jarvis Johnson, again, that would have required all colleges basically to have SIL programs. It is a very complicated issue, but it's interesting to see that there's a push for that. And then there was a bill that would have expanded transitional services for youth in the system to allow kids to stay in the care till age 23, which is allowed under federal law, and to stay in ETV up to age 26, which I guess is temporarily in place. And that was House Bill 3815. It didn't pass, but it's interesting to see what didn't pass, but also to help inform what we might want to do in the future. I'm going to go ahead and try and wrap this up. I know we're a little behind schedule, but I wanted to mention a couple things. One is that, we are going to see continued expansion of community-based care, which is basically the outsourcing to, nonprofits to take over the roles and responsibility of the of CPS, and that's rolling out on a geographic basis and in a staged sort of way. And so the legislature funded 4 additional areas to do that. The Dallas area, which would be first, and then Region 9, which is out in West Texas, includes, Midland. It's a big, expansive, pretty rural area. And then Regions 4 and 5 out in East Texas. And that's the sequential order is 3 East, which is Dallas and 8 counties, and then Region 9, and then Regions 4 and 5. So the legislature did fund that. I did want to mention that we're having a pretty difficult time right here in Texas right now with capacity issues, and it's a very complex situation, but it is something that I think is affecting a lot of our older youth. We've lost a fair amount of capacity, and it's just something we all need to be mindful of and figure out how we can support the department and support providers to help with that. Unfortunately, the legislature did not increase rates generally for providers, which I think would have been a help to them to try and make sure we have sufficient capacity. And and we're seeing this problem with children without placement, who are having to sleep in offices or hotels as a result of all this. So we are concerned about all that. And then we are always looking for ideas. What you think the youth and the population that we all work with, kind of what their needs are and how we can work on those in a policy way, both with the department and through the legislative process. It's only about 18 months till the next legislative session, never too early to start thinking about that. And that's, I just wanted to try and run through that quickly, try and get us back hopefully a little bit on schedule. And we'll have time for questions at the end here. So please let us know if you have any questions on that. And I'm going to turn it over to Deborah is here.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Andy, for sharing your expertise with us. And, we're kind of peeling away the layers of the onion, the federal updates, the state updates, and now we're going to hear how it trickles down to the practice level and the DFPS agency updates. So over to you, Deborah.
Okay, and I decided to do a quick little PowerPoint, and I'm gonna do share my screen. You guys, please let me know we have the screen. I'm gonna move through this information fairly fast. So if people want to get out their cameras and screenshot some things, they can. So I'm going to hit share screen, and you got, hit share. And do you guys see my PowerPoint? You do, great. All right. And let me clean it up a little bit. There we go. And things I'm going to run through really quickly for today is the Foster Youth Pandemic Act as it relates to Texas. Talk some about our education or training voucher. Other quick things they're doing, Life Skills Reimagined pilot, expansion of Transitional Living Services program, and most important, embedded in this are contact information, because you guys may want to hear something, want to be able to follow up, and I want you to be able to have that information. And I am going to start my ticker. As it relates to the pandemic act, tried to break it down, and the reason why I had to break it down by age, because we have different people that are supporting these efforts. So for our youth and young adults ages 14 to 21 in care or in extended foster care, those resources that Angelique talked about, their access through their all of our youth 14 and older, even after they've extended out of care or left care, they still have a PAL worker. So they access that through their PAL staff. We have expanded access to lots of additional funds under educational training voucher and what we call auxiliary in terms of helping out with computers, cell phones, driver's education, summer camp programs for older youth, especially youth with disabilities. We also, that includes for some of our youth that are in care that are not on grade level, to pay for tutoring and other type of resources. We're in the process of arranging for our Texas State our Youth Leadership Council to participate in a National Growing Pains Conference, where they can bring information back and share it with youth and those not in care. This population also includes those that are in care but placed with relatives. A lot of times people get focused in on licensed care, but if they are in our conservatorship, they are our children, and it doesn't make any difference where they are placed. We also have for those young adults who have aged out of care. As many of you may be aware, we've always had an aftercare case management contractors that have always served this population. So we did increase the amount of money for aftercare room and board. We also increased funds to serve this population for anything educational, vocational, any auxiliary needs that they have. And then the other population is the young adults age 21 through 27. We also provided our PAL staff, our regional PAL staff, with emergency funding available. So if they are currently behind in rent, behind in their cell phone bills, behind in anything, there's a place for them to get immediate emergency relief. And by the end of this month, we will have an active procurement that will take care of young adults in this age group, to take care of issues regarding rent, cars, insurance, and a host of other resources. We continue to explore different vehicles in which to push out all of this funding. I included 2 websites on here. One is to the DFPS website, where there's information that goes into more detail regarding support during the pandemic. We also included information there, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna put up another website through our Texas Youth Connections website. Say that again, Texas Youth Connections website. That is the website that was built for youth by youth, to make sure they also have a place where they go to get critical information. One of the things I do want to share, Texas did not wait for this legislation to occur. When all of this began to happen in February and March, that we knew that our, especially those young adults who had left care, was going to need assistance. While I had to play by Texas rules, because this did not come out, that we always had an extended foster care program, return to care program. During the pandemic, we only had 10 young adults who wanted to come back into care. Most of them came back into care to participate in the campus-based SEAL programs and the regular SEAL programs. We only had 1 young adult that returned to actual foster care program, and that was with the previous foster parent. What we saw with our young adults was that those who had established their independence wanted to keep their independence. And so we used a lot of our resources during that time before this legislation came out to pay for their rent, to pay for their utilities, pay for transportation costs. We did everything that we could to try to help them maintain their independence, because while we've always had extended or return to foster care, our youth talked about sometimes it felt defeating to have to come back into care. And I think some of us can relate to that. When we went out on our own, then we had to move home, and we did not necessarily like that. So we used a lot of our resources to help our young adults maintain their independence in the community. And now with the passage of this act, we're continuing to support those that are living independently, them and their children, so that they do not have to return to care. Next, just additional information. I really would like to, there's the eligibility. This is the worst and the best bill ever, because there were so many quirks to this bill. But that just kind of talks about some of the funding that we have is only good through September 2021. And then there's additional funding that's available through 2022, especially for that older population. That is where a bulk of these funds are. However, regarding ETV and the raising of 5,000 to 12,000, that is still, as we move beyond September, is still based on the cost of attendance. As many of you guys are aware, Texas has a tuition and fee waiver. So between the tuition and fee waiver, us setting it up to initially 5,000, now to go up to 12,000, that unless they're in a private institution, they're not going to have a lot of cost of attendance that's going to go as high as 12,000. Those in private schools, yes, for sure. The best way to help and assist your student is to refer them to texasetv.com. As many of you know, we have a contractor. Their contract has been amended to cover these additional funds, especially for non-cost of attendance relief, where people had to pay out of pocket when we could not cover some of those expenses. But please have them reach out. We've had a lot of our students who submitted ETV applications back in the fall. We've encouraged them to resubmit their applications to make sure that they're taking advantage of all of this additional funding. And so the best way is, while this presentation is great, every student has their own individual needs. And I think that it's really important for them to reach out either to their PAL worker or to the ETV contractor to make sure they understand what they need, and for them to take advantage of all of this additional funding. One of the great things I'd like to be able to report now, separate from the pandemic, is that we, beginning in the fall, the state of Texas is raising the age for ETV. Before, many of you know, it was just up to age 23. Because of the tuition and fee waiver, because of the SIL campus-based programs, we've been crunching the numbers, and we're able to go up to age 25. Since HB 3815 did not pass, it would have raised the age up to age 26. But we will be sending out massive amounts of notices to folks to let our students and our youth and young adults know that ETV has been expanded up to age 25. One thing that did not change as a part of the Pandemic Act is that it's still, you can only take advantage of ETV up to 5 years, total of 5 years with ETV. That did not change. And we did have some students that approached us that already had taken advantage of their 5 years. We checked with our federal partners, hoping that we missed that, but we did not miss it. They told us that we could not go beyond 5 years, which is a little bit disappointing, because that would have opened up the door for those who were working on their graduate's degree to be able to still receive ETV funding. So some of the other things that are going on as it relates to transitional living services that we are looking at our life skills training. There's a lot of people saying, well, how come you don't take it and become online training versus classroom training? What are the pros and cons? Is it beneficial, not beneficial? So we're going to do a pilot, and we're going to have a certain amount of our youth go through the regular traditional PAL life skills training classes, and another a group is going to go through the actual online training. And so there's going to be pre and post evaluations, and also going out beyond the 3 to 6 months to see if there's any difference in how much information that they retain following this pilot. So our data and our analytics team here at DFPS, we're working closely with them. They're setting up the structure for us to do that. But we really want to make sure that, you know, what we are offering as relates to the life skills training based on the federal requirements of life skills training, that we are really hoping that they are, by doing the comparison, how much they are really retaining. And there's so many variables that we have to look at, because along with the training, we also have state and teen conferences, state and team meetings where additional information is coming in. So it's a little bit tricky to make sure that are they really learning all of this information through life skills training, or are they also learning it through all of these different avenues? Also, this past year, in the middle of the pandemic, we expanded our transitional living services program to include 2 new positions. One is our youth employment specialist. Her job is to develop and implement programs geared toward improving employment outcomes. It's the youth specialist, employment specialist is Gay Vopat, and many of you on the call have worked with Gay in the past as she was the lead for this division. Then she retired and she came back with unfinished business. And this was her unfinished business, to really expand the work that we do with Texas Workforce Commission, with our local workforce boards, to really expand internship programs, work study programs, and to really work on the skills. What we have learned over time is that our youth and young adults work hard. They're not scared of hard work. But what we have found is that sometimes their soft skills and people skills sometimes has interfered with their ability to, not just to get a job, but to keep that job. And so we are working, she's working very closely with Texas Workforce Commission, who does have a very strong commitment to our youth and young adults who've aged out of the foster care system. We just updated our MOU with them. We're working on updating our local workforce boards MOUs, but also because of the funding through the Pandemic Act, we are also entering into an interagency contract with them to help us really move forward as it relates to skills development and employment opportunities. And the pilot site for this work will be up in the Dallas area. The other position is our youth housing specialist. One of the things that we know is that to truly successfully transition from foster care, you really have to have that stable housing. For our youth to be successful, they cannot just continue to worry about the roof over their head, where their next meal is coming from. It is hard to really be successful when you're still worrying about those basic things. So I have employed a youth housing specialist, Jim, and I have their information on another slide, has a background in terms of working on housing issues, especially working with HUD. Jim is going to be coordinating our efforts as it relates to the Foster Youth Initiative called FYI and other HUD vouchers across Texas that are really there to help support our young adults transferring out of the foster care system. We have already entered into relationships with over, I think, about 30 local housing authorities, along with other community partners, to help secure these housing vouchers and the support services that are needed. It's not just about getting a housing voucher, but our young adults need help and support as they get these vouchers and they establish their independence. And as we all can relate to, even when we went out and got our first apartments, we still needed help and support from others, from our parents, from others in the community, because we've never lived completely 100% independent and had to be responsible for all of our bills and how to budget your money. And so Jim, along with our PAL aftercare providers, our 18 transition centers across Texas, are all working in partnership so that when our youth really do leave our care and transition to independence, that they can be successful. And both the employment specialists and the housing specialists are, to me, are keys to that overall team that really helps support our youth transitioning from care. This is the end of my presentation, but if you guys can get out your cameras and take a screenshot of this information, it has all of the folks that can assist you if you have additional questions. Cherie is our team lead for transitional services. Todd does everything PAL, preparation for adult living, contracts and resources and services. Gabe Vopat, our youth employment specialist. Jim Courier is our youth housing program specialist. And the person I didn't get a chance to talk about was Ophelia Jocelyn. She is our lead for extended foster care and return to foster care, but she's also our lead for the supervised independent living program. And that program is for our youth who no longer want traditional foster care, who want to live independently out there in the community. She is our lead for that work. She's worked with many of our colleges and universities, and we're working with some now to bring this campus-based program to the fall. The last two members on here is Kayla and Brittany. They are our state office youth specialists. Kayla's expertise, along with being a youth specialist, and these are young adults who experience the foster care system, who have come back to work for us. Kayla works very closely with our ETV folks, and Brittany is our youth specialist. She's in the Houston area, where many of you may or may not know, we have a high number of residential treatment centers in that area. And Brittany is doing a lot of outreach with those youth that are participating in those residential programs. But she's also a support to Jim as we look at those housing issues and the support that they need to be successful. I know I've covered a lot of information in a short period of time, but please visit our DFPS website. There's additional information regarding pandemic support. Same thing with the Texas Youth Connections website. You can also visit and get some information on our Youth Take Flight Instagram account. All of this information has been shared with many of our partners, with the 18 transition centers across Texas, and anyone that is pursuing post-secondary education that's currently attending 2-year, 4-year college or university. All of the information regarding their support is listed through our ETV contractor. So I'm going to stop talking, and I just want to thank everyone for listening to me, and I hope you are able to screenshot this information.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for your decades of service and for sharing your expertise with us today. I have one question that came through that I think is an important clarification. It was about the ETV age extension and a question about whether that's a temporary change or a permanent change.
It's only a temporary change as it relates to the pandemic, but the change going up to, again, not pandemic related, but back to business as usual, the age is going up to age 25. We hope to have that in place by October 1, because while the federal statute allows us to increase our age, we still have to do the rule and other things that bring that into life. And our ETV contractor is aware of the age change, and that information should be or soon to be reflected on their website and the other places where they put out information regarding ETV.
Thank you so much. That was a great clarification. And we've had a really great dialogue over chat. If you haven't had time to check that out, I encourage you to do so. All of the presenters and some of the board members have responded to the questions as they can. And if you have others, please just contact us and we'll be happy to answer them as best we can. Getting a lot